Hello and welcome back to this second session. We're still delighted to have Anne Harrison, formerly of Stevenson's and now of the SRA, with us. We had some fascinating discussions earlier on regarding the SQE and the impact that's going to have on the profession. And whilst we've got Anne here, I think we had some other questions for her.
Yeah, but can I dive in, Mark, with one that's dear to my heart? Many years ago, Anne, when I was on the LMS committee, one of the tasks I was invited to undertake was to help the Law Society draft its consultation response in relation to price transparency. And somewhat cynically, and you may say, well, you would say that, wouldn't you, being a pricing consultant, Nigel? But I took the view that the regulations as they were being canvassed were not going to help consumers and weren't going to help law firms either. Now, in the last few weeks, we've seen news that the SRA intends to get tougher on non-compliant firms. Perhaps you can talk to us a little bit about what that might entail for law firms, but before doing so, you might have been on the same side of the fence as me 2 or 3 years ago. What's your view now about whether price transparency regulations is actually helping either consumers or law firms?
Yeah, I think at one point I would have been on the same side of the fence as you. I can remember going to a meeting in Manchester and before the rules were brought in, and they had someone from the Consumer Council there and the SRA and the Law Society, of course. And I can remember a really heated argument starting up about, well, how on earth can comparison on price be effective when you're talking about a complex legal matter? You know the arguments, and they've gone around and for a long time now, I think. My views changed largely because of the approach that I experienced in my firm and the way that we came to the price transparency rules. And we took the view that it wasn't a case of just putting prices on your website, but it was an opportunity to use your window on the world, be it the website or brochure or whatever is your way of marketing, but mostly websites, to explain to people why they need to choose a firm who is best for them, and what about your firm, what it is about your firm that should make people think that you're the one for them. And it seems to me that the price transparency rules are a fantastic platform to enable firms to do that. And that's certainly what happened at Stevenson's. And we've gone from, I shouldn't say we anymore. The firm has gone from strength to strength on the back of that.
I couldn't agree more, Anne, in terms of the opportunity. Whether the rules themselves aid consumers and law firms is a question that you've very nicely dodged there. But I do think that the way your old firm went about it is the way I would encourage most firms to go about it, which is the rules are there, you have to comply with them. It's an opportunity to communicate value and differentiation.
Yes, yes. And I think the SRA have had a very softly approach up until now to enable people to get to grips with it and to think about how they can best use the rules for the advantage of their clients and also for themselves in acquiring new clients. And I think we'll see that maybe toughening up a little bit, but also I think that we're talking about extending the range of legal matters that are subject to the price transparency rules.
Well, that was always going to happen, wasn't it, Anne? It was always the thin end of the wedge from a certain perspective. Yeah. What's the goal in toughening up from the SRA's perspective? What are they seeking to achieve?
It's all about access to justice. And it's all about informing and educating consumers, clients, whatever you want to call them. So it's about giving people the most information that they can have to enable them to decide, A, whether the problem that they have warrants paying a lot of money to a solicitor, and then B, which is going to be the best firm for them.
Interesting. I'll step aside and let Barry and Mark chip in on this rather than try and monopolise, and that's very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I can understand that for pure consumer-facing things, it makes perfect sense. So if you're moving home and you need to appoint a conveyancer, well, what's it going to cost me for the conveyancing? Although I've seen some slightly, what I might call it, underhand, might be slightly pushing it, responses from firms who put on a price and then everything's extra, filling in the SDLT form, filling in the land registry application, opening letters, but it's £199 plus VAT, but it's going to be a lot more. So, but I think it becomes much more difficult, if you're then comparing commercial services, because it must boil down, as you say, to the value proposition of, is there somebody here with in-depth knowledge of the specific issue you have and experience of solving these sorts of issues? Because commercial clients, price of course is important, but value is more important. So you've taught me well, Nigel.
You've learned well.
Sorry, carry on.
I'm just going to say, I think Mark is exactly right. And I suspect that perhaps these rules are aimed more at individual clients rather than the sophisticated commercial client.
That's the key word, isn't it? It's to help people who are peering darkly into something for the very first time. You can see how there might be, I'll give you that, a benefit for them in that. But for XYZ Limited or PLC that spends 50,000 a year, it's useless, it's redundant.
But again, I think what I'd be more interested in probably is the SRA enforcing people being honest at the level where it does matter, in terms of if you're giving a conveyancing quote, are you actually telling the client what it's going to cost them to buy their house, rather than a hodgepodge of bits that they can't really interpret because they don't understand the system.
Yeah, we often hear, don't we, that solicitors are less than clear in the language they use in communicating with their clients. We will all have seen solicitors' websites that, given the simple task of letting the world know what they'll charge for a house move, will then spend the equivalent of 5 pages of A4 making it as hard to find as possible. And that's great. Thank you very much. In terms of price transparency, I'm sure we're done. We got time, Mark, for another topic?
I think we could squeeze. You had a question, Barry, didn't you? Around.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we were chattering earlier and looking at the issues affecting the profession these days, and you expressed some concern about money laundering and felt that was one of the things that was top of your list.
Yeah, only because I've been engaged even this morning in reading the government's consultation about where we go with this and how we can improve the regime that we've got.
Okay.
Whether what we've got is fit for purpose.
So what advice would you have for people who've tuned in with their coffee to chat to us, or to listen to us chat, sorry?
I think if you fall within the regulated sector, making sure that your people are trained to the best of your ability, follow the LSAG guidance, and make sure that you keep records. And I would say central records, because they're easy to access.
Okay, that makes sense.
What's perceived to be the weakness in the current system, Anne?
Inconsistency, I think, Nigel, from what I've been reading. Inconsistency across people who are subject to the regulations. And then also the other side of that, I suppose, is duplication. I've just been reading an article about the fact that estate agents, banks, mortgage companies and solicitors all have to do their own individual checks. Mm-hmm. Nobody can rely on each other. So you're duplicating the same checks all the way through. So I think that there is a big task ahead to try and improve and simplify what we have. And it'd be interesting to see where the government goes with the role of the organisation that no one has ever heard of. Is it called OBPBAS, who is the overall supervisor for AML? And I think this had a fairly low profile so far.
Yeah. To me, it's all about, you know, I know it's from the older version. We have to do everything correctly now, but it's about knowing your client. It's, you know, getting the copy of the passport, of the utility bill, and sticking it through the electronic system and filing it centrally is all well and good. What I think we have to train people on is there something about this transaction that gives me a dodgy feeling? Is there a little red flag somewhere? Does something not seem right? Why am I feeling uneasy? Yeah, that's the element of training I think is important. I get very nervous about systematizing these things, because people then just focus in on, have I ticked this box, have I ticked that box, have I carried out the process, rather than actually looking at the underlying transaction and going, does this make sense?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Mark. And before I retired, I was money laundering reporting officer for Stevenson's for some years, and I never ceased to admire the people in our residential conveyancing team who always had that sixth sense, and they could always smell when something wasn't right. And I think you're right. If you're doing your job properly, if you know your client properly, then the hairs on the back of your neck will stand up when you get something that's not quite right. But I think that the rules ought to help us, and to some extent the changes that came in last year, I think that they do help to some extent, but I think that there could be more in terms of certainly consistency across different types of firm, and also in terms of the guidance that comes out as well.
That's really useful. I'm conscious of time as ever, so I think we'll wrap this up. But so thank you very much, Anne, for coming in and talking to us on our coffee break. Thanks everyone for listening in, and we will be recording some more, I'm sure, as the year goes on. But thank you and goodbye.
Thank
you.
Everybody. Nice to see you all.